I think that was the motivation. For some parents, I'm here in the diaspora, I live here, my child is going to grow up here or was born here. Why would I bother teaching them our languages? They won't need it. Because let's be honest, for some parents, they left the country for all sorts of good reasons, but they are in a mindset that, you know what, my home country is not over. My future is here. My children's future is here. What's the point?
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of AMO Talk Show, your platform for all issues impacting Africans in the diaspora. My name is Tulia. If you don't already know that, we have a problem, my friend, because that means you're not subscribed, and I need you to please do that. So go ahead and subscribe to our channel. For all of those who have been following us, we appreciate you. We really are grateful for all that you're doing to make sure that others know and are aware of this platform. I would like to welcome our guests today. I've brought another episode that you're really going to enjoy. You're going to learn so much from, because talking to this person the past couple of months, I've learned so much. So I really pray and hope that you get to learn just as much as I've been able to learn from him. Today with me, I have Freddie. Go ahead, Freddie.
Hello Tulia, hello everybody. So my name is Osoko Freddie Shonda. I'm the co-founder of Language Connect by the Shondas, LCS School. I live in the UK, and yes, talking to you today. Really happy and grateful for the invitation I got from Tulia to discuss on these platforms a key topic, which is central, I think, to our African communities.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about preserving African languages in the face of globalization. I know this is a topic that will resonate with all of us because we are all struggling. How can we ensure that we can pass down these languages that are so important to us, that hold so much meaning, not only because we love the languages, but because they come with so much culture. And so today I'm talking to Freddie about that. And the reason why I called Freddie is because Freddie has a school where he's trying to teach languages. And so you guys, you're going to love this. But Freddie, how has the colonization of Africa contributed to the decline of the mother tongues or the indigenous languages?
Yes, definitely. I mean, historically, as we all know, the colonizers, when they came to Africa, they came speaking their own languages. They found Africans speaking their own languages, native languages, and therefore who needed, because they colonized per se, and they basically imposed their ruling over our people. Consequently, they also imposed their languages. So it was now down to the Africans to learn foreign languages so they can communicate with the colonizers. And he went even further because they now also imposed to Africans to even communicate with other Africans using the colonizers' languages. I think this is when it all started. Beforehand, Africans were functioning, developing, creating, using only their languages because that's all they knew back then. So yes, so I think colonization has had a major impact on the history of African languages.
And so because of that, right, we've seen that over time, a lot of people will start to take on the language of the colonizer more seriously than they take their own. What do you think is the impact of that when it comes to preservations of African languages?
Yeah, it has had an impact because their utilization increased while the utilization of African languages decreased. Education was predominantly ensured using either English or French or Spanish or Portuguese or Arabic, depending on the country. Formal official communication was done in European languages. So if you take in the everyday life context, how often you need to communicate, and when European languages had to be used, that has had a knock-on effect on the utilization of our own languages. So native languages, African languages, now became only used for within households, for informal communications among friends on the streets. But for anything formal, a European language has had to be used since then. And I think that's the consequences of us, I would say, gradually diminishing the utilization of our own native languages.
Right. And the world is becoming more of a global village, right? And the international languages are really ruling right now. English is everywhere, even in the Congo where we come from. That wasn't really a thing, but now English is taking over. How this globalization of the international languages, how that affects our cultures and traditions, our culture identity and our tradition. And is there a risk of culture erosion?
There is a risk. There is a risk because behind, I would say, globalization, you have economic, I would say, strength and empowerment. And therefore, English, for instance, is widespread, is because most of the Western countries who have led the world economically are English speakers, you know, predominantly the US. But a few centuries ago, French used to be the global language. You know, even in Europe, in all the European courts, French was spoken, you know, by all the kings and queens and duchesses, etc. Now, since the late 20th, middle of the 20th century, the US and the Western world led economically, and consequently, they imposed and made their language, which is English, a lingua franca. So for us then, consequently, as Africans, unfortunately, we've been economically, despite our wealth of natural resources, at the bottom, and consequently, we've had in a position of following, or followers rather than leaders. As we're following, we have to adapt. And one of the adaptations we've had to make is to basically adapt from a linguistic perspective. The West, those who are leading globalization and businesses, those who hold in their hands the global wealth, they speak English. Consequently, if we don't want to be left out, we also have to speak their languages, predominantly English, but it's also French for especially a lot of African countries, and to some extent other European languages. Now, that said, I don't think it's too late, and I think it requires two things. The first one is clearly we have to work hard as Africans to make sure that we develop and emerge significantly from an economic perspective. We have to have an impact inside that global world and environment. And then secondly, is also us having that pride to say, you know what, even though we are in this global context, still we have to make sure that we don't lose out on our languages and then our cultural heritage. Because you can take, for instance, Far Eastern countries, you know, they are there economically, yet they predominantly use their languages. If you go to countries like China or Japan, people tend to think that, yes, English is everywhere. But when you get there in reality, you would realize that everything is done in their own languages. Trading is done in their own languages. They hardly speak English. They don't really use English. They do everything, science, engineering, anything to do with economic and industrial development is done in their own languages. You see what I mean? And those countries,
even the entertainment industry, like you find that like a lot of people are watching K-drama now, and K-drama is all done in their languages.
Yeah, in their languages.
They're watching Chinese shows. Everything is done in their languages.
I grew up in France. I grew up in France. We used to watch a lot of animes, you know, Japanese cartoons. They're all in Japanese, and yet it's still globally successful. So yes, it's twofold. I think there is a correlation between economic empowerment, cultural empowerment, and the life of languages. So this is something we need to address, I think, if not combat as Africans.
Right. So now coming down to like the family level, the individual level, and I know you and I have had these conversations where we're seeing a trend where descendants are not knowing how to speak their language. They're losing their native languages. Why do you think that is? And I know this is a phenomenon that like has takes place everywhere during each migration. However, it just feels like with ours is a lot worse. You see Asian people here in the US, you see Asian people in Europe, and they could be second generation, third generation, but they still speak their language. Or if they don't speak it, they understand it to an extent. What is happening with us and why is it so?
Yeah, from my personal observations, there are multiple factors, multiple reasons.
Oh, and also, Freddie, this is also a trend in the motherland as well. So even though in the diaspora we're struggling, in the motherland, you will go if someone lives in the city. Oftentimes they speak the national language and not indigenous language, or they speak the official language, just the official language, or the official language and the national language, but they don't speak the indigenous language. And also there's this generational gap with it too, where you see our parents and our parents' parents knew multiple African languages. They would speak the official language, they would speak a national language, and they would also speak like two indigenous languages, whereas for our generation, things are different. Let me know. What do you think? What's happening there?
Yes. So for those of us living in the diaspora, there are multiple reasons. I think for many parents, it was based on the willingness to give all the chances to their children to succeed in education and afterwards in a professional career. So therefore, I'm a parent, whether I gave birth to my child here in Europe, or my child came here as a small child from Africa to Europe, or the West in general, it could be North America as well. Well, I'm in a country where everybody speaks English or French or German or Swedish or any other European language. I want to make sure that my child has got the same level of chances of succeeding in school. Consequently, if most of the children speak French as their first language, they go to school and they will be speaking French, I would want the same for my child. Consequently, I will teach my child French and I will set French as my child's first language. Same principle applies elsewhere. In the UK, it's an English-speaking environment. I want my child, when on their first day at school, to be speaking English like any other child. I don't want my child to be singled out by the teachers to say, oh, that child actually has got an issue. They don't speak English like any other children. That's, I think that was the motivation. For some parents, I'm here in the diaspora, I live here, my child is going to grow up here or was born here. Why would I bother teaching them our languages? They won't need it. Because let's be honest, for some parents, they left the country for all sorts of good reasons, but they are in a mindset that, you know what, my home country is now over, my future is here, my children's future is here. What's the point? You see what I mean? I had a good experience, bad experience back home. You know, I fled warfare, I fled misery, etc. So that kind of explains. And it's not blaming them because, especially if we haven't gone through those trauma, we don't really know the consequences of those and why it could explain it. But those are observations I've made, speaking to some of our students or even speaking, you know, within the community in general. So those are the two reasons why we see a lot of parents not teaching their native languages to their children. I would say another reason is perhaps also some children, the parents didn't pass down the love for their home country, you know. Sometimes although parents will have raised us in, let's say, English or French, still they would have talked about their home country. You're from this country, you're from Congo, you're from Ghana, you're from any other country. That's your root, that's your origin, that's the language we speak over there. And consequently, the child grows up and develops that love for their home country. And consequently, they will feel that attraction and that willingness to say, you know what, I'm curious, I would also like to learn that language. And that's how you see oftentimes many people in the diaspora, they do have a good level of understanding. They can understand it even very well, watch a film, listen to music and sing. But when it comes down to speaking, because they weren't used to speaking, they only spoke either French or English, they won't be able to speak. They can understand, but they cannot speak. So those are the three main categories. Now, when dealing with people back home, what I've observed, and that shocked me, when I went back to Congo as an adult in 2020 for the first time as an adult, I had gone back as a child, I realized that I was speaking Lingala, but some of my relatives who were born and bred there weren't really. They were only speaking French. And I was like, how comes? Born and bred in Kinshasa, where Lingala is widely spoken. But parents told me, well, it's a bit shameful when your child goes to school for the first time, and because the whole education is strictly and only in French, they don't understand French, they can't speak French. That's shameful. And there's also that stigma that the stigma around the correlation between intelligence and a certain level of education in society and how well you master French. Taking Congo, for instance, where French is the official language. And if all you do is speak any of the official language, national languages, if not native languages, then you are considered as somebody who hasn't really made it in life or isn't that intelligent. So
you're not prestige.
Yes, yes. So that prestige, that thing whereby I want to be aiming for the upper class, in society, consequently, you have to be speaking French. And I think this is why we have that trend towards more and more children being raised only in French. And oftentimes what tends to happen, because they are still growing up in an environment where Lingala is broadly speaking, if I'll take Kinshasa for instance, they will end up learning Lingala on the street, sometimes with friends from the neighborhood. Yes, that's what tends to happen. But yes, I think it's a bit of a societal / cultural phenomenon which has been going on.
One of the things that I've noticed is that, I was born in Congo and I grew up in a refugee camp for a little bit. And my tribe, the Bembe tribe, is originally from a really remote village, right? In Congo. And so our people were very secluded prior to the war. They didn't go, the only time people left was to go to Lubumbashi to study, or to go to Kinshasa to study, or to go to Bujumbura to study. But people didn't really leave other than for the reason to study. They stayed in their communities. And so when the war came and a lot of us found ourselves in Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, all these other African countries, right? There was a paradigm shift in our culture, in our language, everything changed. You see now kids who were born in the refugee camps, they don't speak our native language, However, us who were born in Congo and came to the camp as children, our parents were very strict on it. But for some reason, at some point while in the camp, it must have came up that our language was too primitive, that you were bote, that's how they would call you, that you're too primitive, right? If you speak the native language and you don't speak Swahili, if Swahili isn't the language that you're speaking at all times, then they look at you like you're not good enough, you're not prestigious. And for us, we had the schooling in French, but not enough people knew French well enough for it to be taken that seriously in school. And yeah, the teachers ask you to speak French in school. They did, but it was more so like you spoke Swahili as the national language, and you learned Swahili in school, but outside of that, like there were no other languages taught. I'm seeing this trend over here where we have those kids who were raised in the camp and they're now in the United States and they don't speak their indigenous language. However, I've also seen that there's like the music industry is helping us and is helping our kids come to terms with who they are and where they come from. Okay. Recently in the AFCON, there was the Congolese and Tanzanian match, and a lot of our kids, a lot of the kids that were born in the camps, they were rooting for Tanzania. The reason they're rooting for Tanzania is they feel like they are Tanzanian, right? They were born in the camps. That's all they know. So for them, it was like, yeah, I'm Tanzanian. I speak Swahili like that. That's who I am. Whereas like for us who were here in the States, prior to like 2016, I want to say, a lot of us pride ourselves in being Congolese. There is this pride about us being Congolese and us speaking our native languages, regardless of where we're at. That's not the same case for these other kids. You hear people who would say, oh, you guys love speaking Kibembe so much. You're always speaking Kibembe everywhere. And because of the music industry and the kids that were here, and those who do pride themselves in being Congolese and being Bembe, they will speak their language. And I feel like that has been helping those other kids who may not speak it but understand it, start to try to speak and understand the language. So it's been really interesting to watch, because what you said is true. Parents want their kids to do well. So you do have those parents who were here prior to 2016, but they really enforced the rule in their house where they wanted their children to be able to speak English by the time they started kindergarten or first grade, and without any problems, right? So that's to me, I just find that to be very interesting. What do you think is the role of women in helping preserve the language and or risking the language erosion? Because for me, right, I think that it's easier for women to assimilate or integrate into a new culture. Whereas for men, it is harder. However, it's not the men that are the nurturers naturally, right? It is the women. So what happens if a woman quickly assimilates and want their children to speak perfect English with a great accent and go on and do all these things?
Yes, the mother in the household has got a key role, as you said, rightly said. Mothers do nurture their children. Although a child learns a language from everybody around them, the mother, the father, the siblings, if they do have siblings, the transmission of the language skills is done a lot through the mother. That's why we talk about mother tongue, not father tongue.
Right.
Yes. Although in some households you can have the child speaking one language with the mom and another language with the father, then you have mother tongue or father tongue. But we talk about mother tongue. And it's true that we've seen in a lot of our African communities, it depends, we do not generalize, but yes, women can be sometimes quicker to assimilate and trying to navigate through the challenges of having moved from one environment to a new environment in the West. And they would then pick up a new culture, a new language, embrace it in some cases. And that can have a knock-on effect on the child, because if the mom is like, you know what, we're now here, I want to make sure that you are equal to other children in a new environment. I don't want you to be penalized. They may then sometimes unconsciously just pass down the new language, the local language, and then neglect their native language themselves. They would still speak it with friends and family, but when it comes down to their children, they may say, he's a child from the West, they have to speak the local language. What's the point? And I think, it's a challenge, and I don't think there's a right answer to that, but perhaps we should think of ways on how we can ensure that those children are not penalized as they start school, and yet still develop from a young age the language skills from their home countries so that they can speak both. I think something we tend to neglect is our ability as Africans to be speaking many languages fluently. And you mentioned it actually earlier on. If we look at especially the generation of our parents, if not grandparents and great-grandparents, you would hardly find somebody only speaking one language. They would speak at least two to three languages. They were all polyglots.
Can you only speak one language?
It's impossible.
The minimum languages spoken by an African, or the average language spoken by an African in the past, was 4. That's the average. I know elders in town that speak like 8 languages, 9 languages. It's incredible.
Yes, and yes, they studied, they had good professional careers, so why wouldn't we? You see what I mean? Why wouldn't we? And even when looking at some of our former heads of states in various African countries, they all speak quite a few languages. So I personally think that we have to have our own model whereby multilingualism is promoted. We tend to think that because the West unified languages to say we only speak this language, that's the main one, we believe that in order to develop and progress and move on and enhance our, I would say, economic development, we have to unite around one language. No, we can be prosperous and yet have a multilingual, I would say, function.
I agree with that. So I would like both of us to maybe give multiple tips, right? On what parents can do, because we're all stakeholders in this problem, right? What can we do as individuals? What can I do personally to ensure that my children would keep our language? What can you do? What can we do as a collective to help?
So what I would say, for me, as a community, especially talking to community leaders, is first of all, I think what matters is to raise the awareness of our culture. We have a culture. It's not perfect. It may evolve. The way we live our customs and traditions nowadays in the 21st centuries is different to the way our parents and grandparents used to live it in the 20th centuries. And even them, having been born and bred in Africa, the way they had been practicing their customs and traditions in the 20th centuries is quite drastically different to the way their own forefathers used to back in the 19th century. So whether we still live here in the West or we still live in the continent in Africa, culture, traditions, and customs evolve over time. That's one thing. Secondly, for children to feel the need and understand the importance of learning our languages, they have to have a positive image of where they come from. If the narrative is predominantly negative, why would they? So it's that positive image of this is where we come from. Yes, we have issues. Yes, there's warfare. Yes, there's poverty. However, those are the positives when it comes down to your culture, why it is important. And this is something which should be part of the education. So that's one thing. What we do at our level, me personally, for instance, along with my wife, who's the co-founder, we launched this language school because initially when we launched it, it was just me, giving English and French classes to students, but we thought surely there's something we ought to be doing from a cultural perspective. We are Congolese, we know our languages, but what would happen if we weren't teaching them? What would happen if we don't provide a platform for young adults, and young children to learn our languages in the same level, at the same level of quality and professionalism as we would for a European language? We still have some of our elders in the communities who know our native languages inside out. They know the history of the language, they know the grammar, they can speak it and write it with no single French or English or Spanish words. Just pure Lingala, pure Swahili, Chiluba, Otetela, etc. Therefore, we thought, you know what? Let's work with those elders. Let's work with those professionals we have in the community, not only here in the West, but also in the continent. Some of our teachers, they are based in Africa, Congo, South Africa, Tanzania, Kenya. And let's create this platform where parents can virtually, because it's 100% online, take their children so they can develop those skills. Maybe they felt like we can't teach them those languages. Maybe themselves, they don't know them that well, so they can pass it down to their children. But at least let's provide a platform which will compensate for those loopholes, and then make sure that ultimately we uphold our cultural heritage, because this is our identity. A peoples with no identity is a people who could be just led astray and lost ultimately.
I agree with that a whole lot. I do feel that like some other things we could be doing, right, is making sure that like I like the point you made about teaching our children about where we come from in a positive light. Are there negatives? Yes, but it is so important for your children to understand that there is good in where you come from. We are Congolese. It is the richest country in the world. And for your child to feel proud, to know that like I am Congolese, to go out and tell their friends, I was born in the US, I was born in Iowa, but I am Congolese. I am Congolese by heritage. My parents come from Congo. My parents' parents came from Congo. Another thing that we could be doing ourselves is relearning our languages. Because I think even as a young adult, right, there's so many things I don't know in my language. Even though I'm a fluent speaker of Kibembe and Swahili, there are things that I am missing. So we should be playing an active role in learning, because when we relearn, our kids see that, and when they see that, they feel proud of you, and they want you to be proud of them as well. And so, yeah, making sure that we're relearning with technology. So much has changed, right? So much has changed, and we're able to have shows. There are shows in Swahili. You have classes. You're teaching classes. People making sure that they're taking advantage of that. And I want you to speak in just a little bit of the other indigenous languages that you're teaching, because I remember last time you told me Kitetela. Is it called Kitetela?
Yeah, Otetela. So
Otetela. See, I don't even know.
yeah. So that basically what we decided to do is to really focus on Bantu languages. So Bantu languages, because yes, we said African languages, but for a start, we want to focus on Bantu languages. Then in the medium to long term, we'll see if we need and if there's an opportunity maybe to expand to other types of African languages. But we said we're going to start with Bantu languages, and we don't want to be focusing only on what have been categorized, especially in Congo, as official languages. So, national languages. So in Congo, we have Swahili, Lingala, Chiluba, and Kikongo Yaleta as national languages. But if you look at other languages like Otetela, like Kisonge, like Mongo, you've got millions of speakers of those languages. So why would we only offer national languages? Why wouldn't we offer those other languages? Because again, if you want to learn about the Tetela culture, the proverbs, the sayings, the traditions and customs, those terms only exist in Otetela. There's no other way. Yes, you can find translations, but it's never the same.
Translations, it's never the
It's
same.
never the same.
Never the same.
We're going to start off with Otetela, but we don't want to stick to Otetela. I'm originally from Sonko, so that's why I thought, okay, Otetela would be good, and especially as I know a lot of, especially in our parents' generation, a lot of Tetela speakers, they don't really speak Lingala. Some do speak Swahili or Chiluba, but yes, it's predominantly Otetela. But I know that my plan is to expand to other languages. I've been asked once a few months ago about Kimongo. I've been asked about Kisonge. So let's learn our languages. And it's not only languages from Congo. We are also considering Shona, which is one of the major Bantu languages predominantly spoken in Zimbabwe. Why not expanding to Zulu, spoken in South Africa and even neighboring countries? Yes, so we are going to look. I've been asked about Bemba, one of the main languages spoken in Zambia, for instance. And all those are Bantu.
I always get asked if I speak Bemba, and I'm like, no, I speak Kibembe, which is somewhat close Bantu languages, man, but not really.
And those languages, they are intelligible. Somebody who speaks Lingala would not struggle to learn Swahili, and vice versa. Somebody who speaks Chiluba can easily learn Kikongo or Otetela or Kimongo. They are Bantu languages. Or we can go on the other side of the Congo River, where we speak Kilari, Kikongo, Yipunu, Mboshi language. They all are Bantu languages. I heard somebody one day speaking Kilari, and some of the words were something like the Tetela language. I was like, oh, that word sounds like we've got a similar word in our Tetela. You see what I mean?
That's amazing that you're doing that. It will really, really help the next generation. We have to be able to pass down some things. Even if your children cannot speak the language, let them at least learn to understand the language. One thing that I know that some other people are doing is making sure that their children, they speak to their children in their native language. Even if the kids are going to respond in English or in a national language, at least you're speaking to them so they're hearing it and they're understanding you. Other things is travel. Please, the people that are here, if you're having children in the US, you're having children in the diaspora, travel with your kids back to the motherland. Let your children see where you come from so that they can attach the language to a culture, right? And not just the culture that you're raising them in the household with, because our cultures they're quickly evolving because of the environment we find ourselves in. But if you can take them back for them to see the beauty of the motherland, it is so important. For those of you who may be asking, where if I don't have anyone around? I say, when I was in the university, I asked a member of my family to give me a Kibembe Bible. I took that Bible and I read it intentionally. Did I get everything in the first month, in the second month, in the third month? I didn't. It took me a good year and a half reading that Bible for me to say, you know what? Actually, I feel like I can stand and read this in front of people. Because I didn't know how to read in my native language. Like, I could understand it, I could speak it, but I didn't know how to read. So I took it upon myself to learn how to read. Another thing would be listening to music in that language. I tell my English students all the time that you need to start listening to English music and watching English movies. If there are productions of your language, like the Yoruba people, they do an amazing job. The Igbo people, they will have movies. There are movies, even if they're in English, right? Even if they're in English, you'll find that there are there's some of their languages inserted in the movies. So those are some of the things that I feel like are necessary or would be helpful to a family that's maybe wanting to do that with their kids. And also, if you're the person that tells people at a party, oh, speak English, why are you always speaking your mother tongue? Stop it, please. Really stop. Because why are you shaming somebody for speaking their native language? What does that say about you? And I think oftentimes those are people that don't know their native language. And so to cover up their insecurity, they'll tell you that you're primitive. Anyways, I think this conversation has been great. And I feel like we need to continue this conversation because there is a lot more to this than just what we've talked about today. So, Freddie, if you could give a takeaway, what would it be?
So clearly, I would reiterate what you've just said. I was even thinking about it. For those that can afford it, because let's be honest, it's not always cheap to travel, especially as a family, to especially Central, Eastern, and Southern African regions, even Western Africa to some extent. But if you can save some money, plan a trip, even for a week, take your children over there, even the grown-up ones, it would be beneficial. It really is beneficial.
It makes so much
Yes,
difference.
that's the one thing. And then I would say the taking is, let's look around. We're not the only people who had to emigrate, leave our home country, have children being
Right.
born and bred here in the West. Yet, do they all forget about their culture? Do they all ditch their cultural heritage? Not really. So it's not too late. It doesn't say that it's one or the other, but it could be both. And I would say that we have to resurrect a multilingual approach to our societies, which was the approach our ancestors used to have before colonialism. They were trading a lot. You had lots of commerce and trades taking place throughout Africa. Yet, every people had their own language. How did they manage to communicate for such trading activities?
Right.
It's because people always knew at least 3 to 4 languages. A lot of them are, like we said, intelligible. Bantu languages are spoken from Central Africa all the way down to South Africa. So it's not that hard and it's not too late. Let's take advantage while we still have our elders with us to uphold our cultural heritage, to benefit from that transmission so that they can be passing down what they've learned from their fathers and grandfathers before it disappears. That will help us remain and become even stronger as a community and make sure that we do have an impact in the midst of this globalization.
Right. I appreciate that point. I really do. Because we have a responsibility, right? We have a responsibility to relearn. And when it comes to African history, a lot of people do not know how our people lived prior to colonialization. And that's problematic, right? If you are a young adult watching us right now, if you can't tell me about how our people lived, even if it's just 1, 2, 3 things, then there's a problem. We need to start doing research about who we are, and knowing who we are means us going back to the past and understanding our past, because there is no present, there is no future without a past. So we have to go back. We have to learn from our elders. We have to learn from our ancestors, and that will help guide us to our future. Man, thank you. Like, that is such a strong point. So profound. I appreciate that. Anyways, Freddie, where can people find you? If people wanted to find you, get into LCS, how can they do that?
So they just have to go on our website. The website is bilingual, so whether they are French speakers or English speakers, they can navigate through the website, and over there they'll find all the information about the schools, what we have on offer, how we operate, how we work. They will find testimonials from most of our students, all of them who share their testimonials with us. And they will also find access to all of our social media platforms. So we've got presence on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube as well.
All right, perfect. Well, you guys heard it from him. For those who listened all the way to the end, thank you very much. We will continue this conversation some other time. But for today, we're done. But you guys keep waiting. keep waiting for more from us. If you've reached the end, go ahead and click like, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, comment on this video, give your feedback, because we want to hear from you. We want to engage with you. If there's a topic that you're interested in and want to see on the channel, please go ahead and comment below. I will make sure I find someone that I can talk to about it, so that we can learn together. You guys know where to find us. I hope so. We are on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook. Please go ahead and follow us on all social media platforms and subscribe to this channel so that you guys know how this algorithm thing works now. Please, I beg you, come and subscribe. Much love from Emo Talk. Mwah.
Ondaba ikamba teto chenga chaba mikaba nipo kwetu taona babya ikamba nabake bana hola tabaki Osaka tona mpaka to Osaka toko bole abole to opaka toto chena maike mabi chaka betuto abo wa makala jole moba wa boba